Speaker, what's needed now in the New Zealand electricity sector is security of supply and transmission of electricity, its affordability and its predictability of pricing, and its sustainability as far as its production and use is concerned. And this bill fails to deliver any of those priorities. And it fails to even meet the government's own stated goals and objectives for the sector. It's all very well to seek to improve competition, which is what the bill's explanatory note says it will try to do, to seek to constrain price increases and increase security of supply, and to seek to ensure effective and streamlined governance of the sector. Those are the three stated aims of the bill. But in the end, what we need to do, sir, in this House is judge legislation by its likely effect based on the evidence we hear rather than on pious intention. And what the House needs to hear, I think, from members who served on the Select Committee is that the evidence before the committee was damning as far as the likelihood of this bill's ability to achieve its aims are concerned. Sir, it's true that New Zealanders are struggling to keep up with the rapidly increasing costs of living. It's been interesting to hear the speeches in the House tonight about how high electricity prices have been. After nearly 2 years in office, under this government, those prices have just continued to rise and rise. There's a howl of protest from across the House. How about some evidence? How about some facts? Okay, in the last quarter, sir, the CPI increased by 0.3%, while electricity prices increased by 1%. That is runaway price inflation in this sector that members opposite have done absolutely nothing about while they've been in office to address. And that's a trend, sir, that will only be exacerbated by a 2.5% increase in GST from 1 October. And we heard Mr Boscawen talk earlier about the price gouging that we've seen from gentailers. He mentioned 4.5% from one gentailer as a result of the implementation of this government's completely substandard emissions trading scheme. And if this government, sir, were really serious about addressing the problems in this sector, it would certainly not be stripping assets from one SOE to give them to another in order to ready both of them for privatisation if this government wins another term, because clearly that is the only purpose, the only end in these asset strips and asset swaps. Mr Speaker, the fact is that this government and this minister just don't understand what's gone wrong in this sector since the Bradford reforms in the late 90s. The problem, sir, is the ongoing failure to treat electricity as a public good, where fair access for everyone, not just for those who can afford it, should be the ultimate goal. And it's true that Labor and government made the mistake of leaving the Bradford system in place. That did lead to increased prices. Phil Goff apologised for that at last year's annual conference of the Labor Party, and this House can be assured that the Labor Party won't make the mistake again when it's our privilege once more to lead a government of leaving the market in place in this area. But make no mistake, sir, this bill, by seeking to apply more market rather than fewer market reforms, will just make the problems worse, not better. Sir, this is a bad piece of legislation. It fails to balance the essential priorities that should be balanced. Instead, it will exacerbate the problems identified by seeking to implement proposals that haven't even been properly evaluated. With something as essential to everyday living and commerce as electricity, any reform should be evidence-based. But what did the Treasury tell us about these reforms? Well, here are three comments as far as the Treasury's evaluation of these reforms are concerned. First, the government should have included a more comprehensive discussion of the risks associated with the proposed options. It should have provided a better idea of the magnitude of the costs and benefits of the options discussed in comparison to the problem they're trying to address, and it should have better reflected the range of views received during consultation. Those are strong words from the Treasury, sir, and yet here is this government and this minister simply rushing to appear to be doing something in the electricity sector that will in fact weaken security of supply and increase the rate of costs in the sector, rather than doing the opposite, which is the stated aim of the bill. Sir, in reality, the measures in the bill that claim to seek to increase security of supply will actually put huge upward pressure on prices, and that demonstrates the fundamental conflict at the heart of this legislation. Contact Energy told the Select Committee that it will need to raise retail prices by 5% per annum every year from now on. This just can't mean that we will see lower price rises in the sector. We won't see any taking the sharp edges off the recession for ordinary consumers. Because that's the price rise level that Contact needs to put in place to keep putting generation assets in place to keep the lights on. There isn't any way around it, sir. If you keep the market in place, which is what this minister intends. It's also contradictory, sir, that the bill's overall thrust is said to be to increase competition and to provide more market-based solutions in the energy sector, when in fact many of the changes that it would implement run the risk of entrenching natural monopolies and their anti-competitive behaviour. And sir, we all know that monopolies and anti-competitive behaviour lead to price rises, just as sure as night follows day. What are some of these short-sighted entrenchments of monopolies in the bill, sir? Well, they include the removal of the role of consumers and sustainable energy suppliers in the conversion of the present electricity market rulebook to a new code. There'll be no place for consumers or for representatives of sustainable energy suppliers on the new governance body. The proposed standardisation of distribution price schemes that'll limit lines companies' opportunities to reduce costs to their own networks, because their ability to offer differential tariffs to their customers is severely limited by the legislation. Why bother to bring lines companies into the equation if you're going to tell them they can't price imaginatively or innovatively and compete properly on the market in the areas where they can offer real strength? Another real problem, sir, is establishing Transpower as the system operator by statute, actually enacting that they should have a monopoly role in this area, rather than providing by contract between the parties as now that is their role so long as the parties continue to agree, and allowing lines companies back into retailing while having no regard to the real risk that there will be huge barriers to entry created for other players once those retailers have entrenched themselves in their natural monopoly areas. So these are really bad ideas that run contrary to the rhetoric in the bill about introducing more competition in the sector, because for those reasons, in fact, competition will be lessened, and they are essential areas that need to be addressed and were not addressed by the Select Committee. So lastly, this bill does nothing to bring any sort of coherence to the energy policy framework. The government's rushing to legislate without providing any certainty over the status of the New Zealand energy strategy, something which the Minister said 18 months ago he would update, but as to which we've heard no further announcements. He's simply putting all his faith in this legislation, which the experts say is contradictory and unlikely to work. The bill fails to address any of the major issues that face the electricity sector, even the ones highlighted by the government in proposing it. It fails to address the major issues facing everyday New Zealanders, such as the increasing cost of living, and will in fact increase those pressures. Sir, at the earliest opportunity, a Labour-led government will repeal this legislation and replace it with a legislative framework that ensures New Zealanders will have an environmentally sustainable supply of electricity that is affordable, secure and priced predictably.